we thank you so much for gathering us together in this manner. Even though each of us we may not be meeting face to face, we thank you that we have this technology where we can come together to learn from Dr. Joel Arnold, and pray especially for Dr. Joel Arnold, that you will grant him the wisdom, the grace to bring forth your word to us. Help us as we learn together, and may you so lead and guide us. We thank you. We pray and ask all this in Jesus' name.
Amen. Dr. Arnold, all yours. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, good evening to you all. I'm accustomed to greeting in our other online classes good day, because everyone's in a different time zone, and it's a little easier for us all to be in the same time zone. So it's a good evening. I am utterly delighted and excited to discuss our topic tonight. For starters, because I love the book of Ecclesiastes, and so any topic in the book of Ecclesiastes is going to be delightful. But particularly with what we will do tonight, our topic tonight is work. And to get a biblical perspective, or the perspective of Ecclesiastes on work, is going to be deeply fundamental to our thinking about life and our thinking about what we do, what we spend so much of our time doing. Let me show you this just so you have a big picture view. Here is my plan. Oh, excuse me. Well, we can do it here. This will work fine. Let me show you my overall plan for how we would progress as we work together through this topic. So here are the topics that I've outlined for us. Last week we did exposition of chapter 1 and the concept of vanity. What is vanity? Introduction to the book of Ecclesiastes in that theme. Tonight, talking about work is good. Next, injustice and oppression, which is another major problem or discussion in Ecclesiastes. The poem of chapter 3, this is that to everything there is a time, everything in its time poem. But together with that is this balance of wisdom concept. Do you know this challenging passage in Ecclesiastes 7? Be not over righteous, be not over wicked. So it kind of sounds like too righteous is a problem, too wicked is a problem. And of course, that would bother us. It should bother us. Okay, well, we'll talk about that. Ecclesiastes 5, 1-7 is this passage that tells us, do not go foolishly into the presence of God. Fulfill your vows. And God is the one you must fear. Why? Because you are on earth and he is in heaven. Okay, rich passage. Ecclesiastes 9, 7-10, enjoy life, live life with joy, with the woman that you love. Let your pour oil on your head, let your garments be white, that concept. This is read just because I'm still working on it. But the exposition or the explanation of the last chapter, aging, the ultimate conclusion, fear God and keep his commandments. And then summarizing thoughts. That's the plan. Those are the 8 lectures that I want to do. And we'll work through each one of those concurrently as we keep on going. Let me pause for a second, and let's talk about this first one here that we already discussed last week, the exposition of chapter 1 and the concept of vanity. So we saw very clearly last week how this worked itself out, and we saw very clearly this introduction to the book. Right at the front of it, this concept, it started out with weariness and frustration and toil, all of these concepts. And at its core underneath that, really, a concept of vanity, vanity of vanities, everything is vanity. Okay? All of it is kind of an emptiness concept. What I want to do is ask you for a second, if we remember, because I want to make sure we get this back in our minds. What are the main ideas, or what are the big concepts that we talked about last week as a definition of vanity? We know from last week, vanity is the key to the book. The beginning of the book, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. The end of the book, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. It starts and it ends the same way. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity. But what did we discover last week about the word vanity and what it means? Someone want to take just a stab at it, drop it in the chat, and let's see what we come up with. Because we have to. We have to know what is vanity, since it's such a fundamental part of understanding this book. Okay? Anyone, what do you think? Let's drop some thoughts in the chat. What is vanity? What did we discover last week? What did we come up with? I'll give you a moment. What is vanity? Okay, bubble. That's good. All right. Idols. Excellent. Good. Some great concepts that we talked through last time. Someone else. That's 2. Meaningless. Excellent. Good. So now we have 3, and that means, well, I'll count myself out. So that means 28. There's 28 more of us. What do you think? That which does not satisfy. Good. Let's take a couple more, a few more. Futile. Great. Good. Maybe one more. What do you think? Anyone? This can be emptiness. Great. Okay, all of those great ideas. And what I'll do is I'll put up here just what we were looking at just a second ago here in the outline, what we looked at last time. And that is this. We saw it's used for idols. That shows up in Jonah 2:8. It's used for breath. That shows up in a lot of places, actually. And one of the concepts that I talked about was think of blowing cold air and then trying to catch it in a bottle. It's not going to work, right? And so underneath that, some ideas that I gave as support for that. Frustration. It shouldn't be like this. Something's wrong. Something's broken. It shouldn't work this way. Transience. Why is life going by so fast? I mean, it just flies by. And enigmatic. A puzzle. Like life itself is this puzzle that you can't crack. Where you find yourself asking hard questions about your existence and how do you know truth and how do you find certainty and these kinds of, and the deeper you think about it, the more puzzling and the more impossible and the more frustrating it is. Okay. Those are all concepts that we worked with to come to this conclusion, that Solomon says all of life is vanity. All of life is like trying to catch joy, meaning, and truth and stuff it in a bottle. And it doesn't work. You can't do it. Okay, well, that's good. I want to move to get our time and use our time well to talk about our topic tonight. And that is moving to this idea, work. For starters, I can absolutely, and I think we'll all recognize this, we can absolutely recognize that Ecclesiastes is packed with discussion of work and the significance of work. So here what I did. I just gave you kind of a sampling of some of the passages in Ecclesiastes that are talking about work. And I'm highlighting here the words work and toil and labor. Passages like this as we go by. You see this. All the toil of man is for his mouth, yet his appetite is not satisfied. The concept being, and I've thought this a lot, okay, you work so that you can eat, so that you can have enough energy and health to go back to work. But then you work so that you can eat, so that you can go back to work, so that you can eat, so that you can, what are we doing, right? This idea. And so we work to try to keep ourselves going so that we can do what? Keep on working. You see things like this, a contrast of God's work with man's work. And yet man cannot find out the work. However much man may toil in seeking, he will not find it out. Down to this conclusion that's a big deal here later on in the book. Whatever you do, whatever your hand finds to do it with your might. There is no work or thought or knowledge or wisdom in the grave where you were going. Okay, so it's everywhere, actually. If you just look at the top of my screen, do you see these passages up here? Okay, those are the passages on work. I just gave you a sampling. Okay, but there's a huge number of passages if I actually included them all in here. And I can give this to you in the form of the notes, because it might be a very interesting study that you might enjoy looking at yourself. Let me give one qualification as far as how to think about work when I say this, and that's this idea. Don't think by work, don't think what we tend to think in our modern contexts. We tend to think work as in, I went to work. So work is what you do from 8 to 5. Or whatever, work is what you do Monday to Friday. Work is what you do as your job and you get a salary. Work is what gives you a paycheck. And I think in terms of Ecclesiastes, if you read the passages, you discover work is a lot broader than that in Solomon's usage. By work, what he means is something more like activity, effort, the things you do. I mean, it includes everything. So it includes housework. It includes sitting down at 8 o'clock on a Thursday evening to watch a presentation about Ecclesiastes, because you're putting some effort into it, right? And so the mental effort of that is part of the activity, and that's part of the work. So let's think of it broader than just things you get paid to do, though what you get paid to do is certainly part of it. Okay, so here are some of the foundational ideas that Ecclesiastes is going to start us out with. And here you can see the passages. I'll just drop them in the chat right now. But start with this foundation. Work is good. Work is a good thing, not an evil thing. Work is a thing to be grateful for and to maximize and to live well doing your work, and not just a thing to try to avoid. And so the lesson of that becomes learn to enjoy your work. Okay, let me explain or build this idea out just a little bit. So let's look at some supports for this concept. This is a very different notion and a huge contrast from maybe our cultural assumptions or the things that our world tells us to think about with work. And I'll give you two comparisons that are like this. Here's one. It's an anecdote that my father-in-law told me when he's with his kids. They're growing up, little kids, they'd be like the age of my kids, and they go to a zoo. And they're standing outside the cages. This is a picture of Caroline standing in front of the cage. They're looking in like this, and they're watching the monkeys swing around. And two other people walk up beside them, a little ways away. And they make the comment, "Wow," they say, "that's the life. That monkey sits inside his cage all day. He doesn't have to do anything. He gets free food and free rent. And he just rests and hangs out and sleeps. Sleeps all day, that's all he has to do. That's the life," was their comment. And so they finish this comment, and then they walk away. And my father-in-law is standing there left with his young kids. And he waits till the people leave. And then he leans over to the kids and he says, "Okay, kids, did you hear what they just said? That's wrong. We deny that. That's absolute folly. That's foolish. That's a terrible perspective on life." Right? And he makes a big point out of it for this reason. If you really think that's the life, you try it. I mean, okay, you really think that's it? Fine. Okay, maybe it can be arranged and we can get a cage for you at the zoo. And you can live your entire life inside of a fence while people walk by and look at what you're doing every day and observe your behavior and point at you and laugh at you. And I think what you would discover after a very short time is it gets really boring in there, right? Why? Because as a human being, you're not made just to eat, sleep, have free rent, and do nothing. You're not made to exist. You're actually made to work. And like we said a little bit ago, not just work as in make money and get a paycheck, but for activity. So that part of your essence as a human being, God gave Adam and Eve a charge, right? Go, subdue the earth and have dominion over it. Part of your nature in the way he made you is that work dignifies you. Work gives you purpose and meaning and things to pour your effort into, and it's good. And so we ought to absolutely reject a part of the culture that says something like work is an evil to be avoided. If only I had so much money, I never needed to work. What would be a much better perspective, I think, is for us to get to a place where we say, even if I was a billionaire, then maybe there would be a few things that, maybe I would be able to give more of my time in direct service to the Lord and working at my local church. Maybe that would free me up, or it would change my schedule in some certain ways. But even if I was a billionaire, I would still work and enjoy it and serve God. Because it's not just about making money. It's about enjoying my work for the honor of God. Here, I'll give you a second expression of this, or another form of this. And it goes like this. Let's contrast this with weekend or retirement culture. And by weekend or retirement culture, it's an idea that goes, basically your goal as a working person is to save up enough money or get to a point where you have enough that you can just spend all your time playing golf or something, right? Your goal is to get to a point where you don't have to work anymore. And in the meantime, your goal every week is to get to Friday, right? And so if you can get to Friday and you got to the end of the week, now I'm done. And so life is lived Saturday and Sunday. Life is all about Saturday and Sunday, and also your retirement years. That's where it's all at. And work is like a purgatory to be endured in order to get to Saturday, Sunday, and retirement. Okay. We absolutely ought to utterly reject that notion. Recognize how much of your life you spend working. And so seriously, if your conclusion was something like, well, I'll endure this work stuff so that I can get to the good stuff Saturday, Sunday, and retirement. You just wasted like more than 50% of your life, of your waking hours. I mean, you just threw all that in the trash can? Really? That's really a bad idea. Okay. And in contrast to that, here's what Ecclesiastes is going to lead us to do. Ecclesiastes is going to call us to have this perspective on work. That we would say something like this: enjoying life. And we would do that in our toil, at which we toil under the sun. And whatever we do as we work, we would do that with a confidence that this is a privilege I do for now, because there is no thought, there is no work, there is no knowledge, there is no wisdom in the grave where I'm eventually going to go. Let me give you some other parts of this concept. How about this? Going back to Genesis 1:28, I already made this link, and it's a creational kind of link. It's a link that's at the foundation of who we are in our existence, as how God made us. Genesis 1:28, you know the passage, I think. God blessed them. God said to them, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the heaven, over every living thing that moves on the earth. And the concept or foundation there is going that work is part of the way God made us and part of his task that he gave us in our lives as fulfilling what he intended us to do. Okay, so it's like a tool, it's like a piece of equipment. It's something that is created to work a certain way. Okay, me and you and I as humans are made to enjoy and to prosper and to do our best when we have something that we're pouring our efforts into. So a lesson of that becomes this, and it's based off of Ecclesiastes 9, 7, and 10, what I gave just a little bit ago, and the concepts that we were unpacking there. Doing work well is a basic foundation of our enjoying it. Okay, don't just do the minimum required. Determined to do a good job at everything you do. And there are a lot of secular expressions of this, I think. Steve Jobs, the Apple guy, there is a kind of it's a bit of an eccentric side of things, but it's an interesting lesson. This came out of Walter Isaacson's biography of Steve Jobs. But when they're building the furniture in the retail stores that are in the Apple stores right now, and they're working on engineering these or creating this, Jobs is really concerned to make sure that even underneath the table, in a part of the table that no one will ever see, he wants to make sure that the joints are put together correctly. And the idea goes, well, it's underneath. No one's ever going to see it. And he says, yeah, but we'll know it's there. And his idea is, even if nobody will ever notice it and nobody else will ever care, let's do a good job because we want to know that we did a good job. And I think a concept like this could go, part of our enjoying our work is not just, well, my employer told me to go this far. He probably won't notice if I only go that far. And if I do that, I won't lose my job anyway. Okay, and so I can do this, and it's like the minimum amount, and I won't lose my job, and it'll be okay. What difference will it make? And I think part of what Ecclesiastes is giving us is, hey, do a good job, and maybe even go above the requirements. Maybe even do more than you have to. Because you know that, and because God knows it. And because honestly, working hard and being good at what you do is part of the enjoyment. Like really going all the way and being good and doing a good job at it is part of what makes work enjoyable. Because you were made to have a challenge. You were made to meet a challenge and do well at it. Okay, so that's kind of the positive side. That's a starting foundation. And that's one of two things that I want to follow through here on our side as far as we think about work. Any questions or comments, drop those in the chat. I'll keep on going. But happy to get comments or questions from you as I keep on going. Okay, so that was that. Work is good. Learn to enjoy your work. Even the concept, do a good job with your work. Right? Pour yourself into it. Do it well. But here's the counter side to that. And this is also just a profoundly Ecclesiastes type of concept. And it's right here. On the other hand, your work will fade away. And your work is not permanent. I promise you, you're not creating anything lasting that will extend beyond you. So don't try to find meaning in your work. Work hard, work well, do a good job, right? But don't think that that will create meaning. Because the truth is, your work is just it's a temporary effort to bring a little bit of order to an incredibly messy, chaotic world. And soon after you pass, the efforts that you made to bring order will get wiped away by history. That's reality. Okay, let's unpack this a little bit. Here's a set of themes that come up in Ecclesiastes. How about this for feeling encouraged, excited, and optimistic about today? Work is often an exercise in frustration. And after that, you're going to die. Okay? I mean, this is painfully blunt and painfully real. But it's painfully accurate. Work is so often frustrating. And the effort that you put into it does so often get just wiped away. And you do that over and over again until literally you lose your strength and you can't do it anymore. Let's see this unpacked a little bit in Ecclesiastes. Don't just take my word for it. Let's look at what Ecclesiastes does, and let's see how this develops. So I'm looking here at Ecclesiastes 1, verse 3, and I'm reading this. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? For all of our effort, what's the point? It all just gets wiped out. Ecclesiastes 2, verse 4, I made great works. I built houses. I planted vineyards. I made all these gardens, these parks. I had fruit trees, male, female, servants, slaves. I had possessions, silver, gold, treasures of kings, provinces. I had singers, men, women, concubines, the delight of the sons of men. Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept from my heart no pleasure. My heart found pleasure in all my toil. This was my reward for all my toil. Okay, so, I mean, just up to that point, up to here, you're seeing his idea. There is kind of a reward. There is something that's deeply fulfilling in doing work and doing it well and seeing results. Great. That's nice. Verse 11. Then I considered all that my hands had done and the toil I had expended in doing it. And behold, all was vanity and a striving after wind. And there was nothing to be gained under the sun. So I hated life. Because what is done under the sun was grievous to me. All is vanity, emptiness. It's like trying to stop so much condensation into a bottle. It's all vanity, and it's all chasing wind. You're running after the wind. What gain has the worker from his toil? And here, one more conclusion in chapter 5. This is a grievous evil. As the person came, so shall he go. What gain is there to him who toils for the wind? All his days he eats in darkness and much vexation and sickness and anger. And that's I think, Ecclesiastes' way of saying work is often an exercise in frustration. And then you're going to die. Deeply frustrating because of the curse, because of the fall, because of the fact that even if you work hard and even if you work well, at the end of it all, it just gets wiped away. Let me pause here for a second. There's 2 questions in a row here that are great. What about retirement? And someone else comment here, is retirement an artificial concept created by man? Is man supposed to work all the days of his life? That's a great question. And there's some interesting ideas that pop up here in my mind. Of course, in my context, U.S. context, this is the assumption. You work, you save, put money away your whole life. When you get to the end, you're going to have some years of retirement. Coming here to the Philippines, the assumptions work a little bit differently. And the assumptions work more like, well, you work and you provide for your family and you make sure they get a good education. And then when you are in your old age, then your children will take care of you. They are your retirement. Kind of is the idea, the way that goes. And, 2 different systems, and each can work in its own way. And within its system, it works fine. I do really like the idea, the second comment here. I really love the idea that on some level, retirement is an artificial concept that we created. I mean, it's not even a very old concept. It's only a couple of generations old, if that. And the idea goes here, let's say that by the time you were 50, you have enough money to live on for the rest of your life. I had somebody in my family that their whole life, their goal was to save up enough money and then move to a part of the U.S., Florida, moved to a part of the US that was it's a retirement culture. It's warmer down there, and there's a lot of, it's a pretty place. It's near the beach and stuff like that. And so everybody's goal is to get down there and retire as soon as they can so they can have as many years as possible down there. And this family member, he got to that point and he did it, and he was miserable because he got down there and he wasn't doing anything. He was just sitting around watching TV and going to the beach. And he got really, really miserable. And he's not alone. Lots of people get there. They get to retirement. This is like the goal that they've been working towards their whole life. They're gonna retire. They get there. And if retirement to us means do nothing, I think we're gonna be miserable. Now, I think there's a fabulous idea if through prudence and wisdom and planning ahead, if you can save enough money and you can retire, meaning you have the freedom now to pour time and energy into other types of things you weren't able to do. Church ministries. You're able to pour into your family. You're able to pour into people around you, evangelizing your neighbors, spending time trying to reach out. That could be fabulous, right? So I'm completely in favor of that idea, but I would like to propose the idea, what we should shoot for as believers. If God will bless us and he'll allow us to save, great, let's do it. But let's plan to work as long as we possibly can, because I think we're going to find joy. I think we're going to find fulfillment in working well for the honor of our Lord. Whether we have the resources or not, let's not think of work as just getting enough to feed our mouths. Let's think of work as something that God has given us to do for his honor, and let's do it well. Okay, great. Some great thoughts there. That takes me down to this next concept. And here's the way I'll state it. It's, again, it's a little cynical, but Ecclesiastes can be a bit cynical. Most people will live pointlessly. Most people will live pointlessly. What I mean by this idea, most of the people around you and the people you encounter and the people you rub shoulders with will work to fill their mouths so that they can work. They will spend their time and their efforts pouring energy and labor into getting enough money, like I said earlier, to feed their mouth in order to work, in order to fill their mouth, in order to work. And it's pointless. It's profoundly, painfully pointless. This is the concept that we see in Ecclesiastes 6:7. And so you have it here. All the toil of man is for his mouth, yet his appetite is not satisfied. And so what's the point? Why are we doing this? Another form of this that it's striking, it's powerful, and I think it really probably breeds some good wisdom. It does breed some good wisdom into the folly of the way that we can tend to live. Ecclesiastes 4, verses 4 and 5. I saw that toil and skill in a man's work comes from a man's envy of his neighbor. This also is vanity and a striving after wind. And I think what is so, if you want to call it delightful about that or helpful about that, it calls the lie to a lot of what's going on in neighborhoods or between neighbors. Something like this, the one guy, he pours hours and hours into his business, and he works long hours into the evening and into the weekends, and he's away from his family and he's exhausted. Why? Because he wants to have the biggest apartment. And he wants to have, a nice sports car or something. And he wants to be able to say to his friends and family and be able to put up on social media that he went to this and that exotic vacation. And the truth is, he's exhausting himself and frustrating himself and burning himself out. And it's kind of all defined by comparison to the people around him. Okay. And so the irony, I'm thinking more of an American context, people that I encountered there. The irony of a guy who has a big, huge, beautiful house and 3 cars or something. And he has the most massive flat screen TV you could ever imagine. And he's got all the stuff. Okay. And so the friends are impressed. And they're like, wow, it must be nice. You've got your own pool. You've got a huge piece of property. You've got a huge house. And he's honest with them. He says something like, yeah, but I'm never here. and he's never there because he's always at work. He's always at work trying to make enough money to pay off the debt on the house that he probably should never have bought in the first place. And he has no time to watch this massive TV because he's always at work. So anyway, the house sits empty while he goes to work and pays off the debt on the house that he doesn't actually own because it's all loaned anyway. This is folly. This is really, really stupid. Sorry, that's a harsh word. Because wisdom would be, hey, try living a little simpler. Try cutting back on your work and actually being human. You know, I have friends that would work until 11 or 12 and get off and go home and sleep for 6 hours and get back up and go back to work and do that all week and Saturday and part of Sunday. I said to one of my friends at one point, you don't have a life. Yeah, well, I'm making a lot of money. That's nice. You don't have a life. Okay. And so Ecclesiastes teaches us that there's something here about work where we pursue it in order to keep up with our friends and keep up with our neighbors, and we want to show them that we are a success or something. And I think Ecclesiastes brilliantly calls us back to normalcy, to be sensible. What are you doing? Now, I am giving this as the foundation that work is frustrating. Work is often an exercise in frustration. And then at the end of this is where it ends. At the end of it, you're going to die. And let me give this to you in a biblical or a theological framework, kind of where this fits into the biblical framework overall. And so I'm going to Genesis 3. And we started earlier, we did the Genesis connection, right? We talked about, God says, here, have dominion, subdue the earth and have dominion over it. So work is good. God gives us work. It's good. Here's the other side. The result of sin now looks like this. Cursed is the ground because of you, and in pain shall you eat of it all the days of your life. And thorns and thistles it will bring forth. And by the sweat of your face you will eat bread till you return to the ground, because you were taken out of the ground and you're going back there anyway. And so out of the ground you come, and for the short years of your life, you struggle with the ground to try to make good stuff come out of it so that you can eat it, and you sweat and it hurts and it's painful, and then you go right back in the ground where you came from. And that, when you really process this passage, sounds an awful lot like Ecclesiastes. That I'm discovering the two actually, they're right on top of each other, they're overlapping. Same principles, same concepts, same ideas in both. Okay, so what have we gotten so far? Well, we've gotten this. Work is good. Learn to enjoy your work. I'll put it up on the screen. It's easier to see it that way. Work is good. Learn to enjoy your work. It's a good thing. Okay, on the other side, your work will fade away. Don't try to find meaning in your work. And if I pause here, I'll come back to this idea a little bit later. But if I pause here, I think what I get between these two ideas, taking them together, process this a little bit, I end up with something of an interesting balance, don't I? In other words, on the one hand, it's teaching me, don't be lazy. Don't sit around and just wait for your life to fade away, right? Life is too short. So work, and work well, and work hard, and maximize your life. But here's the other side of the wisdom. Don't pour your life into work so much that it's like work becomes you, or your meaning, the meaning of you is work. Right? I feel significant because at work I got this promotion or I did this. And so everything revolves around work, right? Don't do that either. So Ecclesiastes is giving us really a rich and beautiful balance that we'll come back to in a little bit. Okay, that takes me to this third point. And that's the idea that God's work is forever. Okay, think about the contrast here. Our work, it's good, but our work's going to fade away, right? It's going to be like smoke. But follow the contrast. My work fades away like smoke. Think about God's work in comparison to mine, and the contrast between his work that is forever and my work that fades away so quickly. Okay, well, let's break that idea down a little bit. Let's process a little bit of what's going on here. I have passages like this that are going to tell us God's work is eternal, or God's work is abiding. It's a work that endures forever. It's not going to fade away. Okay. And let's look at a couple of those. Here, Ecclesiastes 3:14. I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it. Nothing can be taken from it. God has done his work so that people fear before him. And that which is already has been, that which is to be already has been. God seeks what has been driven away. This is a challenging verse to read because there's some hard things to describe in here. But basically, the idea is what has happened, it's happened. What is happening, it's happening, and God stands behind it all. And you have this idea as well, Ecclesiastes 7:13. Consider the work of God. Who can make straight what He has made crooked? Okay, I think the concept there runs a little bit like, you ever have like a piece of machinery or let's say like a metal part. So years ago, we were working where I grew up. We had a trailer, and it would have the hitch hitched to the back of the truck. And so where that hitch went on the ball, you have the ball joint fits over the top of it, right? Well, at some point that got dropped. Okay. And so this piece that was engineered, it was machined to just fit perfectly over that ball joint. It gets dropped and it gets bent. Okay. So what do? Well, we can't fit it on there. So we bang it out with a hammer. And get a chisel in there and bang it just the right angle or whatever. We got it to work. Okay. So we banged it back out and it would fit on. It was never quite right. Right? I mean, because it was engineered just right. It was engineered as a precision part. Okay, and so if you bend it once, you can try to bend it back and it'll fit. But then it's not quite right, so you try to bend the other side to balance it out. You went too far. Bend the other side, balance. You're never going to get it right again. It'll never be exactly right. And if you think now again of that verse, what he's just said here. Okay, consider the work of God. Who can make straight what He has made crooked? Okay. What would that possibly be referring to? What would you think would be, if I'm doing my idea here, my metaphor, this is God's work. Okay, what is God's work? Why would we talk about God making something crooked? Why would we talk about our trying to make it straight? Okay, pause for a second here. What do you think? Give me some input here. How would you read verse 13, chapter 7, verse 13? The work of God, who can make straight what He has made crooked? Give me some ideas. What do you think? Okay, just ponder it for a second. Let's drop some ideas in. See where we go in the chat. What ideas come to mind? It's a hard one. Take a guess. The worst that can happen is you might be wrong. That's okay. Being wrong's a good way to learn. Who wants to take a stab at it? Okay, good. We won't be able to solve problems on our own. I think that's good. How broad of problems do you think we're describing? I mean, because essentially what I'm asking is, what is the work of God? Okay, how broad is that? How much does that include? That kind of idea. How broad would the work of God refer to? What things would that encompass? That's going to be a pretty good clue, right? Work is meant to both be enjoyable and suffering. Okay, good. All right, the experience of working hard is going to be pleasurable. It's going to be fulfilling. It's going to be frustrating. Expect both. Okay, good. The work of God. Let's zone in there. What do you think? What is the work of God? Or any other comments is great too. How broad is the work of God? Or what does that include? Okay, we cannot change anything, even if we think that God is wrong, it won't change. I say it like this: you can say whatever you want about your agreement or your view of God's choices. It won't make any difference. He's not listening in the sense of you correcting him, right? You're not in charge. You're definitively not in charge. Okay, good. God defines what is straight and crooked. Excellent. The question of what is the work of God, this chaotic world we live in, the work of God includes everything under the sun. That's it. I think that's exactly it. That's exactly what I'm looking for, what I'm going for here. And the concept goes like this. God made the world good. He made the world right. Okay. We have broken it. And yet here is a concept that goes for this. Part of the brokenness of the world is also the curse, which came from God himself. Okay. And so I think part of the idea of Ecclesiastes is God in the curse has actually taken the beautiful world that he made. If you want to think of my trailer hitch again, I mean, it's finely engineered. It's so intricate. It works so well. And because of sin and because of the curse, God says, okay, I'm going to picture for you what your sin has done. And he takes the world and he bends it a little bit. The world is twisted a little bit. And that's part of the curse. So he says, here, I want you to see how awful sin is. This is what that looks like in the world. And from the day we're born until the day we die, we struggle with frustration that this world is warped. This world is bent. And so if you go out into the world thinking something like, I'm going to fix it. This world is bent, this world is crooked, and I'm going to make it straight again. I'm going to bring about justice. You know, it's a nice thought, but who can make straight what God has bent? Who can make straight what God has rendered crooked and what our sin has rendered crooked? It's not that simple. Don't think that you can do it. So this gives us, I think, a solid foundation for understanding the frustration or the struggle of life. And then finally this, I'm talking about God's work. What is God's work? And you get this at the end of Ecclesiastes, conclusion for the book. And it runs like this. Remember also your Creator in the days of your youth. Before the evil days come, the years draw nigh, of which you will say, I have no pleasure in them. The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God, keep his commandments. This is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. Okay, where do I see God's work in these verses? And the answer is, first of all, right here. Really, really foundational to the book of Ecclesiastes and its theology is God as creator. God as maker of the world. The world itself, a work of God. Okay. And so part of my living well is to remember, I didn't make me. I didn't make anything, really. God is my creator. God is the creator of all. Right? And so as the creator, this is God's work. He made this world. It is this way because he did it. As well as this, God will bring every deed into judgment. A final work of God is his judgment. Okay? And so everything I do and all of my choices have to be in the light of God and his work. Okay? Putting these pieces together now, let's just integrate all three of the principles that we've talked about so far in terms of the theme of work. So what we came up with was work is good. Learn to enjoy your work. Number two, your work will fade away. Don't try to find meaning in it. Don't try to define yourself by your work. It's a terrible idea. And number three, God's work is forever, unlike ours. Our work is vanity. Our work is smoke. Poof, it's gone. As soon as we're dead, poof, our work winds away. God's work is forever. It lasts. Okay, now this is good because we have enough time to think about some applications for a second. How would we live this out practically? In other words, I can hardly think of something more foundational and definitive than thinking about work and doing it well. If you do the calculation, you can do it on your own time because each person's schedule is different, but try it sometime. Try calculating how many hours out of the week are spent in work. And when you do that, don't just count how many hours you spend at your job. But what I mean is, that includes your job, but that includes also housework. That includes all the activity that you have to expend. I mean, just going to work, coming back from work, going out to the store and picking up groceries so that you can continue to eat and live, paying bills, any of the things you have to do, keeping up with emails, anything you have to do just to keep stuff running. Okay, and I think what you'll come up with is it's a huge percentage of your effort and your time is work. Okay. So living well, really fundamental to living well, you're going to have to figure out how to work well. And you're going to need to be taught by Ecclesiastes to be successful at work. because this is probably like 60, 75, maybe more % of your life, right? And you dare not just say, well, that's what I endure to get to retirement, right? Please don't, right? Learn to enjoy and live and work well in order to recognize that a huge portion of your life is in this. Okay, well, so what would that mean practically? And so I've given some applications here that have helped me, things that I processed about my own work. Number one, let's recognize and learn to accept our limitations as humans. Okay, as a human, this is such a fundamental concept. As a human, I'm finite. I'm not a creator, I'm a creature. I am created. That means that I only have so much time. I only have so much strength. I only have so much mental energy, right? And so I ought to recognize and accept my limitations. For me, what this looks like, I get excited about projects like this. I pour time into it. I love doing it. And I've learned this last year to do better about getting to the end in the evening, setting a time for myself. That's done. Close the books, step away, go spend time with my family, relax. Okay. That's a really good application. Recognize and accept your limitations as human. Okay, but at the same time, once you recognize your limitation, step forward with courage and work hard for the honor of God. Work hard and do it for him. Okay, let's break that idea down just a bit. Who are you working for anyway? What are your goals in work? What are you hoping to accomplish? See, and this matters because if I don't stop and think about it, I just pour myself into the work because I want to achieve the next something, promotion. I want to become a partner. I want to get up to the next level of management. I'm killing myself to achieve this thing. I'm just stretching, desperately trying to get there. And it might be really, really pointless. Now, work hard is great. Work to get that thing might not be wise at all. It might be really, really foolish. And that's because of this. Most people will create goals for themselves. I want to achieve partner status, right? I want to have this much of the equity in the company, right? I want to reach this level of management. I want to be on the C level. So they create goals for themselves, and they work their entire lives to achieve those goals. They get the goals, and they're disappointed. I think part of the concept of Ecclesiastes, what you get in chapter 1 and chapter 2, where he tells you, I made this, I had this, I did this, I achieved this. I think part of what he's showing you is, I had it all. Okay, so most human beings in human history, they don't get to have it all. Most of us have a pretty normal life. Okay, here's word from a human being that went all the way to the top. He's at the very top, the pinnacle, he had it all. And he says, it was empty. Okay, so just so you know, I've been there, I reached the top of the mountain, I saw the view, I took the pictures, it was pretty empty. Don't spend your life pursuing this. What then, in contrast, or what then becomes a more meaningful way to pour myself into my work? How about this kind of concept? Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. I mean, this is not Ecclesiastes now, right? This is Jesus speaking. Lay not up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and corrupt and rust corrupts and where thieves break through and steal. Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven because it won't go away. Or if I was going to say the same thing in Ecclesiastes terms, lay up for yourselves treasures in a place where everything just doesn't go poof like smoke, where it's not just vanity, where it's not just empty. Another way of saying it, don't spend all your days trying to stuff as much smoke as you possibly can into a bottle. And my bottle's full. I've been catching condensation for 30 years. You should see my bottle. It is so full of condensation. It's crazy. I've stuffed so much condensation into this bottle. Okay, that was a bad choice. See? And Jesus would say to us, lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. Okay, this concept really deeply reorients the way that we think about work and the way that we process what we're trying to accomplish. Okay, here's a positive side, because what I've just said, pretty negative. So let's go positive, shall we? Learning to love our work, but do it for our Savior. Okay, and here this becomes a really refreshing kind of concept, or a really refreshing philosophy. Let's go to 1 Thessalonians 4:11. Beautiful passage. I love this passage just for it's simple and it's rich. It's rich foundation for thinking about work. 1 Thessalonians 4:11. Aspire to live quietly, to mind your own affairs, to work with your hands as we instructed you, so that you may walk properly before outsiders and be dependent on no one. Okay? Especially in our societies that drive us to achieve, be the best, go to the top, right? You've got to have these certain badges that you wear in order to be significant. And so the badges that you have on your, the medals that you've achieved tell you, I'm a significant person, I'm important, I'm a success. Right? And here, this just blows the smoke away from all of that. Aspire, here's your goal. Live quietly, take care of yourself and your family, work with your own hands. Okay, that doesn't mean not office work. It just means work yourself. You work, right? Not dependent on other people, not looking for a handout. Just work, as we taught you, so that your testimony before other people is good. Okay, not that I'm trying to achieve the most impressive, I own the most impressive lab. But that I want to show them that I'm working hard and I'm not dependent on anyone. I'm just serving the Lord. I'm going to do what I need to do. I'm going to do what's right. I find that deeply refreshing and deeply reorienting, because it helps bring me back to the fundamental, kind of the core foundation. Okay, here's another, and it's going from Ecclesiastes straight into Colossians. So I want you to watch this progression. Whatever your hand finds to do it with your might. So do it all the way, do it well. Really pour yourself into it. Why? As soon as you die, your chance is done, right? Your life right now, that's the chance you have. That's what you've got. Okay, now pay attention to this. That's almost a quote of that passage that comes up in Colossians. Bondservants, slaves, obey those who are your earthly masters, not by way of eye service, then please, but with sincerity of heart, fearing the Lord. Whatever you do, work heartily. Okay, and this language right here is following. Whatever your hand finds to do it with your might. Whatever you do develops the thought. Do it as for the Lord, not for men. Knowing that from the Lord you will receive the inheritance as your reward, you are serving the Lord Christ. And I can't do this for sake of time, but if you look at the flow of thought in Colossians 3, the whole flow of thought in that passage goes, it's going to reorient relationships in marriage, the relationships of children, the relationships of servants, the relationships of masters. It will reorient all of those relationships under Jesus Christ and our relationship to him. So wives, you submit to your husbands as you would submit to the Lord. And you husbands, you love your wives. Why? Because Jesus loved the church. And so when I get to this one, and now I'm talking about slaves in relation to their masters, the logic goes, you do your work and you do it well and you work hard because Jesus is really your boss. You don't do it for that guy and you don't do it for the promotion. You do it because Jesus is the one you're serving. You are serving the Lord Christ. And Jesus is the one who gives you your inheritance. He's the one that he gives you your promotion, to put it in modern terms. Okay. And when I put that together, I discover all of the different pieces that we've talked about separately here. They all come together and they all overlap. They all tie in. Okay. The emptiness of work comes when I work just to get the income. When I work so that I can collect the money. When I work so that I can get the promotion or make partner. See, so that's stuffing smoke into a bottle. Okay, but here's fulfilling, meaningful work. I work because Jesus is the one that gives me a promotion. I work to please him. I work in the presence of Jesus. I work hard and I work well, even if nobody sees, even if nobody knows, even if no one will ever climb under the table, look up and see how I screwed the legs on. I work hard because I'm doing it for him. And at the end of the day, he's the judge of my work. And he's the one that gives out promotions. And that defines my work. And when I do that now, everything has been reoriented about my work. I find meaning in it. There's a purpose in it. There's a bigger fulfillment in it. Even if nobody ever knows, even if nobody ever noticed, even if the promotion doesn't come, it doesn't matter. And the standards of my work are different because the purpose of my work is to please him and to honor him and for other people to be drawn to him as a result of my testimony. And my goals in work extend all the way to the end of my life. It's not weekend culture. It's not retirement culture. It might change form in my older years because, maybe financially, maybe the Lord gives you freedom in your older years to use your time a different way. That doesn't change anything because all of your earlier years, you didn't work for the money and you didn't work for your boss. You worked for Jesus. So you get to your older years, have a couple of years where you're financially independent, maybe a decade or two. Work for Jesus. He's still your boss. Nothing changed, right? You have a little bit different surroundings. You're still working for Jesus. Same thing, same system, same results. When I put all of this together, I can affirm that work that's done apart from Jesus, it's so empty. It's air. It's wind. It's trying to stuff smoke in a bottle. The work that I do for Jesus, with Jesus as my boss, this has meaning. This has purpose. Okay, that's our discussion for tonight. And I'll just leave that with you. Tomorrow morning, you're going to get up. Most of us, we're going to get up, and we're going to have things we need to do. We're going to have emails that need to get answered. We're going to have people, meetings. We're going to do the work thing. All right. So maybe you're going to get on a bus and you're going to head off somewhere, and it's going to be another day. It's going to be another. It's a Friday, so okay, you're coming to the end of your weekend. I'd really challenge you, try to take some of these concepts and carry them into your work day tomorrow. Try to go into your work day really thinking tomorrow. I'm doing this today. I'm going to enjoy today. I'm not going to just make it through Friday in order to get to the weekend. I'm going to enjoy today, and I'm going to work hard for Jesus. This is done for him. My work is for him. Okay, I see in the chat, do we have time for questions? And the answer is yes, of course. So anyone that has a question or a discussion point, let's talk. Any kind of questions, or you can do that through the chat, or you can open up your microphone. You can ask through that way. Okay, any questions or discussion points?
Just go ahead and ask. Go ahead and ask.
Okay, good question. Should we change our job then? And that depends. It's obviously very possible you could have a job that you really could find yourself in a job where some of the ideas of Ecclesiastes might reorient you so much. You realize the nature of my job is such, I really can't enjoy my life, and I really can't serve the Lord as it is, right? Because this job is so controlling. The friend that I mentioned to you earlier, this situation where the guy's working, until like 10 or 11 at night, and then he goes in the next morning at 7, sometimes at 6. I mean, he barely had time to shower and sleep. It was absurd. And then Saturdays and Sundays and that kind of thing. He was obviously out of church, and his spiritual life suffered really, really badly. Okay, and so a guy like that you could find yourself in a job where you say, this is taking me away from my family, and I really ought to move. I ought to do something different. Okay, on the other hand, let me push back the other way. Here's what my mind goes to, and it's 1 Corinthians 7:17. Let each person lead the life that the Lord has assigned to him, to which God has called him. Was anyone at the time of his call already circumcised? Was anyone at the time of his call uncircumcised? Let each person, verse 20, let each person remain in the condition which he was called. Were you a bondservant? Don't be concerned about it. Yeah, okay. He says, if you can gain your freedom, come on, yeah, of course, do it. I mean, let's be practical. I love that, right? Because It's not all just philosophical, right? If you've got the chance, yeah, of course, take the chance. What are you crazy? Of course, take it. But if you're called in the Lord as a bondservant, as far as Jesus is concerned, you're free. If you're free, actually, you're a bondservant of Jesus. Okay, so brothers, in whatever condition each was called, there let him remain with God. So I would do something like that. God made you an accountant. Be a good accountant, right? Do it well. Do it really well. God made you a teacher. By all means, give effort, take courses if you can, read books, and try to be a really good teacher. And just pour yourself into being a teacher. Do everything you can, right? So whatever God has called you to do it and do it well. But do you need to necessarily lead a job? You probably don't need to leave your job unless you look at it and you say, the nature of this job, I can't serve the Lord with this. Or this is I have no life. Okay? Unless it's something like that. I wouldn't say this means you ought to change jobs per se. And I'm not arguing here everybody needs to go into ministry. No, we can't. That's not practical. Right? It means all of us, it dignifies our work. All of us, let's work hard. Let's do a good job. Okay, let's look at a couple of other concepts here. If working even when nobody sees or recognizes it except Jesus results in others, people thinking you're a lousy worker because others don't get recognized or do get recognized, but you don't. Should we still do our job correctly? Yeah, I think that's a pretty good application. This gives hope to the guy that because of office politics and because of no fault of your own, you're working hard, you're doing a good job, and you don't get a promotion because that guy, his boss is, the uncle is, or the boss is his uncle, so he got the promotion, even though he does a lousy job. But so a non-Christian response to that is forget it, I don't care. I'm not going to try anymore. And I think a Christian response goes, okay, well, the Lord knows that I'm working hard, right? So I'm going to pour into it. I'm going to do a good job. Here's another question. What about full-time ministry retirement? And some of this depends on text. Some of this depends on culture, where you're at. So like I said earlier, here in the Philippines, the concept of retirement works differently. For most American context, full-time ministry, the expectation is that you save for retirement. So whatever is your normal income, I'll just tell you, the way that our income is structured, set up so that here's our income, and then there's an amount that's designated for retirement. And so the idea is when I get into my late 60s or 70s, I should just be able, at that point, my family, we should just take care of ourselves. And so we're not dependent on churches to support us anymore. That's the goal. So anyway, it depends a little bit on culture. There's nothing in scripture that tells us about retirement, how that works. It's probably a culture thing. If they know you are a Christian and they think Christian equals lousy worker, how does that glorify God? Hey, you're right. So you do your best. I mean, you're not going to be able to convince everybody. But there's this idea in 1 Peter, if you suffer because you are an evildoer, if you go to prison because you committed a crime, that doesn't honor God. If you suffer, but people know actually you were doing what's right and that's why you're suffering, that honors God. So there's a concept there, and that probably fits in. Maybe I'll do this last one here, and then we probably have to finish up. To what extent, if we face hardships at work and frustrations too great, how do we know that it's part of God's testing, or it's really time to go? I like this question a lot because of a concept we're going to talk about in a couple more class periods. And I'll just skip down. It comes up in chapter 3 and in Ecclesiastes chapter 7, 16, and 18. Here, I'll put it up on the screen. I guess I can't put it on the screen right now, but later on I can show you. In chapter 3, there's a time for everything, and everything in its time. And one of the concepts that is a big thing in Ecclesiastes is wisdom is just deciding, making hard choices, and it's not always clear. It's not always obvious what you ought to do. Okay, that's right here. Everything in its time, everything in its place. Wisdom is going to have to make a call. So my answer to your question is, there's not a simple rule. Ecclesiastes doesn't tell you, here's how it works, here's how you know when you need to switch jobs, here's how you know when God's testing you. Ecclesiastes is probably going to say something like this: do your best, pray for wisdom, work hard, do a good job, talk to wise people you know, and at some point, when it seems obvious, make the decision. And that doesn't help me in a certain way, because I would like to just have like an app on my phone, and I just open it and it tells me yes or no, right? I'd like it to be simple and clear. It's not that simple. And that's okay. That's part of the adventure. That's part of having wisdom. And so it forces us to go back and read and read and read and think and pray and beg for wisdom. There's no simple answers. Yeah, do the best you can. And when it's clear, God will make it clear. That's the best we can know. Okay, that's all I'll say or do for tonight. I'll hand the time back over to Brother Yuchai.
Thank you, Dr. Joel, for the wonderful, interesting sharing. We look forward to the next week, and really it's an investment of your time to teach us all the important truth. I think that's very practical. It's a very good book for us to study. We look forward to the sharing again next week. And with that, once again, I thank you, and then we shall end the meeting tonight. See you all next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.